Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Getting Fishy With It podcast. My name is Josh.
I'm Christine.
And I'm Amber.
Today, we are going to be talking about anatomy, mostly just anatomy of fish. And this took a little bit of effort on my part. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about how everyone's week is going.
Josh, you want to start talking about how your week's going?
Oh my gosh, my week has been going well. The weekend was good. It was a very restful weekend. I've had like maybe 3 weekends in a row where I haven't had like a crazy amount to do besides things in the house.
Must be nice.
Sort of organizing, and that has been incredible, like really restful and stuff. And then of course the weeks are hectic, but that's because I punish myself by not doing anything on the weekend sometimes. But no, other than that, everything's been pretty good. So little putting out fires here and there at the different facilities, but nothing too crazy. I can't think of anything significant that happened this week. All my fish at home are still alive, so that's good. I don't know.
That's good.
All three that are in that very sparse tank of yours?
Oh, wow. She's coming for me already.
I'll never forget that picture, Josh. It's burned into my brain.
Now that I think about it, why on earth would I put a presentation with my own fish tank, a photo of my own fish tank, and it looks like so barren? But yep, that's my fault.
Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, as long as they're alive.
Yeah.
They are alive. Christine,
are they happy though?
Oh, they gotta be happy. I mean, they're like swimming around. They seem to be interacting with each other. They're not gasping at the surface. So I guess they're not
just
sad.
Like, Josh sucks. Like, this is hell.
They do have to look at my ugly face every day when I walk by.
Oh.
Because I'm doing podcasts and not movies, guys. This is the one limitation.
That's funny.
Christine, or either of you, what's going on in your week? How's
Amber, you go first. Feel free.
Yeah, so my week has been pretty good so far. I started a new job as an IACOOK analyst. And so really getting into the nitty gritty of things when it comes to rules and regulations of animal care and use, which hopefully will be a future episode on this podcast.
Sweet.
But yeah, just really enjoying. It's very different from, providing direct care to animals. This is a lot more, like more of a desk position, but I'm really enjoying it, honestly.
That's sweet. Do you need like a infusion of coffee hooked into your veins to get through all that paperwork?
Yeah. Let me tell you, like last week, it was like 4 meetings per day. And they were like out. I had one meeting that was 4 hours long.
Oh my God.
And I was just like, I'm going to need a snack for this.
That is like a whole separate skill set. Like as much as I like managing a facility, I also just like getting my hands dirty and like crawling around on the floor and doing whatever. Doing desk stuff for me is like not my favorite. I think it's because I don't have any attention span anymore, but kudos to you. It's a tough job to have to do.
Are you doing that from home too? Like, so you have like unlimited access to coffee or?
Yeah,
like
so it's hybrid. So they actually have a lot of coffee there. Thankfully. There's also like 3 different Starbucks on campus. So nice. You really will never run out. But it is nice that on the days I do work from home, I have my own supply of coffee. Like we have a really big old pot of coffee.
They have like a mesh table to make sure that you really stay awake.
Yeah. But yeah, maybe I should look into having a vein little hookup thing.
There you go. Infusion. Cool.
But yeah, what about you, Christine?
Well, I had 3 weeks in a row where we've had these planned power cuts in our facility. So I just feel like that's over now, for better or for worse. And I just feel like my nerves were frayed for like 3 weeks, constantly thinking about all the things that could go wrong, constantly, like every hour of the day. And anytime I'd get a message on my phone or like a Slack message, I'd be like, oh no, what is it going to say? Like, what's happened this time?
Oh, that sucks.
So I just so anxious. And then, kind of getting down off of that, like being super stressed about stuff. I'm just going to stare at the wall for a little bit. Like, I'm just going to watch mindless YouTube videos, so.
I was going to say, I think like when you're a manager, if your phone buzzes anytime after hours, like it's immediately like anxiety inducing because you're like, what happened? Like what went wrong?
Yeah. And I don't have a separate work phone. So like it's just my phone. Yeah. So anyway, other than that though, I blew up my e-scooter. So that was fun. I
live driving it.
No. I live close to work. I live like a 40-ish minute walk to work, which is nice. But I live in also like car central. I'm in Colorado. Like there is no like pedestrian friendly infrastructure anywhere, you know? So every time I walk to work, I almost get hit by a car, and I am a incredibly vigilant pedestrian. Like I am like, you know, I'm not crossing something until I can see the whites of the eyes of the person that is going to hit me, you know? And I was telling folks a story about how like I got my license here and I walked home because the license office is close-ish to my house. And for me, I mean, maybe you know this too, Josh, but you guys all live in like cities, but a 40-minute or an hour walk is not a big deal to me. Like I do it all the time. And so I walked home from the license office where I got my driver's license, and I almost got hit by a car twice. And it was just like, I hate it here. Why can't anyone drive? But I think it's just since the pandemic, everyone just can't drive at all anyway. But so I got an e-scooter, just like a cheap, like off lease, like rental e-scooter around when I moved here, to cut my like kind of commute down to like, you know, 15-ish minutes or something. And there is a bike path I can take, which is fine. But the scooters, it's cheap. It was a really, really cheap scooter. And I've had all kinds of like mechanical and electrics issues with it. So there's not really anybody that can repair these things. So we've just kind of been DIYing it ourselves with like YouTube videos. But the e-bike and e-scooter batteries scare the crap out of me. Like those are the kind of things that will burn your whole house down, you know? So whenever we have to mess with the electronics, it's always like, should I store this outside? Like, you know? So I had bought an external battery to like give this scooter some more juice, but there was issues with connectivity of the battery with like the actual scooter. So we've been messing with it, and I was cleaning the contacts because it wasn't making good contact with the scooter. And I was using this probe to clean the contacts, and it just kind of exploded. Like it shot sparks everywhere. I thought I lit my hair on fire. I like grabbed the battery and ran out the door with it. Cause I'm like, I've seen videos of what happens with lithium polymer batteries. Like I'm just going to take this outside and leave it there. If someone wants to steal it, whatever. And I actually like the sparks that had flown everywhere were the probe that I was using had vaporized. So I lost like an inch of the probe basically. And so that battery was totally toast. We managed to get the scooter kind of working, but like this is an issue that's going to happen over and over again because it's just not a good design. It's just kind of like a cheapish scooter. So I was like, screw it. I can either spend $300 to like fix up this scooter and have this happen again and maybe catch my hair on fire, or I'll just buy an e-bike. So I bought an e-bike. It just arrived today. Now I have to remember how to ride a bike. So
well, congratulations.
So, thanks. I get to look like slightly less of a dork now. Although this is very clearly an e-bike. It's not got like the regular size wheels. It's got the smaller wheels because it's a folding bike. So I still kind of look like a dork still.
Those are cool though, because you can store them like pretty well, right?
Yeah, so. I live in a tiny little townhouse. So I don't have space for like a bike, and I cannot leave it outside here. It will get stolen. As soon as I take my eyes off of it. So, so that was kind of the factor. But yeah. So that's me. I did not catch on fire. So.
Oh, I also, because you mentioned the license renewal, I went and got my New York license, finally, my driver's license. I went to the DMV on like not 10 a.m. and I was like, it's going to be a madhouse. Like I was ready for it to take hours. I walked in, there was like one person, and I just like got in. I was in and out in like 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
That's so funny.
Like, this is great. It's the best thing ever. So I'm excited to have I feel like the licenses, I think they come back black and white. So like you look good. Like you always look a lot better in black and white. At least I do. I don't know. So I'm excited to have a good looking photo.
That's cool. The one thing that I remember from like, I'm from Canada, the media that we always get portrayed to us in like American TV shows we watch was like, oh, the DMV, the lines are so long. Yeah. And also Patty and Selma work there from The Simpsons. So that was the other thing.
Yeah. And they're so awful. Like I remember this one commercial where I think it was like for a car, like Honda or something like that. And they're just like, we've revolutionized the car, but what other things can we change? And one of them was a DMV. And they were like, how about we serve ice cream at the DMV? And it's just this person was like, next, and then handed somebody an ice cream cone.
That's hilarious. That's so funny. Oh my goodness.
Well, I had no problems. I will say that much. So.
That's good. That's good to hear. Cool. Nice.
Okay, so let's get into it, guys.
Sure.
So as I said before, we're going to be talking about anatomy, and I guess I put physiology in here, but we're not really going to talk that much about physiology because we don't want you to have to take meth to listen to this podcast.
Take meth or math?
Meth, okay. Anything to keep you awake. I don't know. We don't want you to have to take math or meth. How about that?
And this is anatomy of bony fishes.
Yes, anatomy of bony fishes. So
that's
we're not really.
Yeah, sorry, shark people.
Sorry, yeah,
you got to go somewhere else.
Shark folks. I think I mentioned sharks like once or twice in here. I feel like, but yes, I did. Okay, because I talked about swim bladders. But all right, so number one thing we're going to talk about is fins. So I actually have sometimes I feel like I have to remember what all the fins are. So everyone knows the dorsal fin. That's like your typical fin that's on the top. And that's the one that people fear, right? That's like the one that people fear. So we are going to mention sharks, right? That's the one that people are afraid of when they're sticking out of the water. So the dorsal fin is on the top, and the pectoral fins are the ones that are like on the side behind the gills. Those are like almost like the arms, what we'd imagine the arms would be on fish. And they use like whenever you see Finding Nemo, they're sort of using the pectoral fins like arms when we're anthropomorphizing them. So both of those are used in balance of the fish, not so much locomotion. They're not used to propel the fish forward, but they're also used in protection. So a lot of times for different species of fish, they'll have a lot of spines there to protect them. And there's a number of fish that can actually really injure you because they have like venom tips to them. Has anyone heard that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay. Sure. Like I know some of the catfish, it's like if you get stabbed by those pectoral fin barbs, like you're in trouble. So I'd be curious to know maybe which fin has been adapted in like for like stingrays. So I guess at some point maybe we'll talk to shark people and like the non-bony fishes about that stuff because it's just interesting. But yeah, I'd be curious to know like which fin that is, or like if that spine is a fin or adapted from a fin. I'm not sure exactly. So
you're gonna make me Google that.
Yeah, you can Google.
Sure.
And then of course the most important fin is the caudal fins. That's the tail fin, right? That's the one that has all the power that propels the fish forward, and they can go very fast using that fin. So that's all I have to say about that. Fins aren't, I guess, that exciting, but I mean, I guess like from species to species, there is a lot of variation in like the length of fins and the coloration that you see on those fins as well, because they can use them a bit for communication as well. So these guys also have a ventral or pelvic fin. Those are the ones that are on the bottom, kind of like near the chest, sort of below the chest. So we'd say those are ventral, right? Like when we're talking about sort of direction of an animal, those are ventral, and those are used in balance and steering. So they're sort of angling which way the fish is going. They can use that to help steer a little bit more, while the other ones are more related to balance. So all the fins on the bottom, so the ventral, pelvic, and the anal fin, which is a little bit further back near the vent, those ones are used for steering as well. So they're just basically wherever that fish is going, it's using those, and it's not thinking that much about them, but it's able to use all these fins in concert to get itself where it needs to go, which is kind of amazing. And that's why when you do see fish later on, or like you see a fish that's sick or maybe injured or something like that, and they do have some issues, right? That's why sometimes they have trouble staying upright. So when any of us who are experts on fish come into even if we're in a pet store, right, and you see a fish can't maintain righting itself in the water, something's going on there, right? So it sort of shows that there's an issue. So it does take quite a lot of processes for this fish to be able to use all those fins in concert, but they're able to do everything they need to do to live a nice fishy life with all those fins.
I think that you missed one tiny little fin.
Wait, what fin did I miss?
The adipose fin.
Oh, tell me about the adipose fin.
So in the little diagram that you have there's that little nubbin of a fin that's just kind of on the caudal peduncle.
Oh yes, the caudal peduncle is like the tail.
Yeah. So that's the adipose fin.
Is that the one?
Yeah.
That becomes the spine?
No. It's
Okay.
not. Sorry. No, it's just a fin that like I'm obsessed with because nobody really knows why it is there.
You're obsessed with
it's
the
just
fin?
there.
Yeah. I love everything about the caudal peduncle, including that little fin that like trout have and some other species of fish have too.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So that one's called the adipose fin. That's what you said? Like
yes,
adipose, like adipose tissue?
Adipose, like adipose tissue, yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
I don't know if we know what I think it was like considered vestigial at some point, but I think it may be part of their like sensory system. But I don't know that everything's been actually shown, but it's like maybe just kind of like an extension of like, being able to sense vibration and sound and stuff like that.
Wow.
So
interesting.
Anyway, yeah, that's the one little fin. I just remember like as a kid reading fish books and seeing the little adipose fin on the diagram being like, that's weird.
So I guess we're fin-ished with this section, so we can move on to that.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
It's all good.
Great pun.
Thank you. So we're going to move. So there's a couple other things here. So we're going to move on to eyes and eyesight, but I don't have a whole lot to say. So if you guys have any thoughts on this, you're welcome to weigh in before we get to the more interesting stuff that we know more about. So typically, at least what the internet has been telling me, is that most fish can see color. There are so many colorful species, and they do use this to oftentimes communicate, right? They're able to. It's not like the level of a chameleon or like a cephalopod, but they are able to change color sort of like shift the color and brighten colors. A decent amount of fish can do that to communicate. It seems like cichlids have a higher level of distinguishability in terms of what colors they can see. So cichlids being, well, it's a large family of fish, but there's like a lot of the more aggressive fish that you see in Africa and South America are considered cichlids. So I don't know the best way to generalize that, but they tend to be kind of the smarter fish. A lot of them are like territorial. Some of them have like levels of parental care where they care for their babies and stuff like that. So they might be sort of a little bit more developed as far as fish are concerned. I don't know how much zebrafish can distinguish between, like, for instance, red, yellow, orange, and things like that. There might be some limitations. So yeah,
the one thing that I think is interesting about fish eyes is, and I think this is the case across most like bony fishes anyway, like the teleos. So their lenses are very different from ours. I don't know if you've ever seen a fish eyeball lens. Yeah. If you ever had to dissect a fish eye. So we have like lenses in our eyes that are kind of like just like a lens in like a glasses, right? So it's kind of like a little, not like a sphere, but it's like kind of like a roundish, like, I don't know. I can't describe.
Like it's like is it like a pumpkin seed? Is that
a good kind of, yeah.
Like a pumpkin seedish looking?
Yeah. So it's not, but like fish lenses are like round.
Oh, it's completely round, like a marble?
Kind of, yeah. And so like, I think that's, fish eye lenses can see, because fish can see a little bit differently from us as far as like they can see like a wider range, but it's a little bit distorted because of the lens. But they also focus on things different than us because their lens is different. So like humans and like mammals, I think a lot of vertebrates that have that kind of pumpkin seed, even though that's a type of fish. Getting confused.
Oh, you're right. I didn't even think about that.
I just couldn't think of what the spheroid or whatever you want to call it is called.
It's like a UFO or something. Yeah. I got you.
It's like a pita filled with something.
Yeah, it's like a pita with like some hummus in the middle. That's like,
there you go.
Like stuffed.
But we focus on things that are close or far by like changing the shape of our lens. Like we have like tissues in the eye that can change that shape. The fish eye, like it's simply the lens moves in the eye itself. Like it moves closer to the retina or further away from the retina. That's how they focus on things. But other than that, that's all I know about fish. But I just remember I was on like a shark tagging trip and like we were striking out on catching sharks. So we're like, let's do a fish anatomy lesson and like look at the eyeballs of this bait fish. And so there's always learning opportunities. So yeah, like one of the people like took the fish eye out and like was dissecting it and showing us the different components of the eye. So it was cool.
That's really cool. I'm learning all sorts of stuff. Oh man. Amber, what are your thoughts?
No, I think it's pretty cool. I mean, obviously fish don't have like eyelids or anything like that, so they can't open and close them. Just comparing to like, mammals. And yeah, but I think it would be really interesting, especially for zebrafish. Again, I don't know if somebody out there has already done it, but just seeing like what range of colors they can see, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so doing like a color test, maybe. I know they've done that with certain animals, like, touch the thing that's red or yellow or green. And so that would be kind of, cool to see.
For sure.
It feels like, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it feels like they probably have not done too much research. Well, not too much research has been done and like has been translated to like net color, because I know like typically like net color is like white, blue, green a lot of times. But, if you could figure out that zebrafish could not distinguish well between like, they can't see certain colors that well, like maybe you would just make the nets that color and then they would be like way less stressed out by seeing this thing coming to grab them. I don't know.
Yeah, there was like a net that was marketed that was red in the pet trade that were like,
I've seen them.
Do you remember? And they were like, oh, fish can't see this. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure. And like, which fish? There's fish are a hugely diverse group. Like, which fish are you talking
Just
about?
Just fish. All fish,
yeah.
Christine.
Yeah. The one thing I always wonder about with fish eyes, and I'm sure you guys have seen this before, either in like media or just in your own handling of fish. I don't know the mechanics of this, and maybe if someone's listening, they could like email us and let us know. But like when you take a fish out of water and the fish is clearly distressed because they don't like being out of water, their eyes always go down. Have you ever noticed that? Their eyes kind of like tilt downwards.
I've never noticed that.
Really?
I guess I never paid attention to it.
Every time I see a fish with their eye like pointed downward, I'm like, oh, that fish is unhappy.
Oh, wow. But what is it?
Zebrafish do it too. I don't know whether it's just, the eye doesn't have the same mechanical like strength to keep the eye centered when they're out of water. I have no idea.
That's interesting.
I'm surprised you guys have never noticed that. I want to see if I can find a picture so I can show you what I mean.
I feel like you're the only person who's noticed it. Yeah.
I know I'm not the only.
Yeah.
Really?
No, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's really interesting. Maybe there's something there. Maybe it's like to protect, right? You know how like the sharks, their eyes will roll back when they go to bite. Like maybe the fish are like, oh, if I kind of angle them down, less of a chance of like injury or something. I have no idea.
Yeah, maybe it's possible. If I can find a picture, I'll just link it in the chat so you can see what I mean. But keep going.
But yeah, I also do know that like eyesight is really important for movement, at least for a lot of studies that involve zebrafish. And so if you're trying to look at the movement of zebrafish, I know that they try not to, analyze that or like study that until day 5. So 5-day post-fertilization, because I guess before that, and again, I don't really, know the mechanics that well, but they're not able to move around or as much maybe. But then after the 5 days, it seems like you can like really, through video or something like that, you can analyze that pretty well. So
yeah, like 5. So the 5th day is when you're going to see like the most like typical swimming behavior, I guess, of these guys, right? Because before that, they might, when they hatch at like day, let's say 3-ish, right? Then they have to go inflate their swim bladders. So, which we'll get into swim bladders later. So get excited, guys.
Yay!
I learned a bunch of shit about swim bladders that I never knew. Wait, can we swear on this? I just realized
I think it's fine.
I learned that's the first. The guys. We don't have a soundboard, but we'd have a celebration for the first swear set on this podcast.
I don't think it's the first one. I think I did swear before. So
you did? Oh,
I think I did.
Okay.
I think I did. Yeah.
We have to put rated whatever on our podcast.
Yeah.
Rated
R. Rated R. But yeah. So anyway, I don't remember what I was talking about, but I think I was talking about swim bladders, but I don't remember why I said that. So
I went back to fish eyes and I linked you guys a picture in the chat of what I mean by the fish's eye pointing downwards. Like it's not centered.
Yeah. It is kind of fake. I do know what you mean, but I guess I never realized that was a thing.
Yeah. When they come out of water, a lot of fish their eyes just kind of like fall like angled downwards.
Yeah.
And I just don't know why that happens.
Maybe he's sad because he got caught.
Probably. That striper is doomed.
For anyone who's a fish anatomist out there, please let us know why this happens.
I would love to know. I would absolutely love to know.
Perfect.
I legit have wondered about it for a long time, and I'm sure I could probably Google it, but every time I sit at the computer, I forget.
So I think we should probably move on. I don't think I have any eye puns, so I'm going to spare you. I mean, I could probably come up with one, but I'm just not going to. I'll be nice for this.
Okay.
I think we're ready to move on.
There you go.
You don't see a pun in your future.
Let's put a lid on that. And talk about our favorite thing. Actually, this is one of my favorite things to talk about, and that is the skin, the scales, and the slime coat of fish. Okay. So number one, just to talk about the skin a little bit, it's heavily involved in osmoregulation, right? So just meaning that it is controlling the flow of water in and out of the body of the fish. And depending on, I think I talk about this a little bit later too, if I remember correctly, because I talk about it with the kidneys, I think, and the excretory system. But, depending on where the fish is, saltwater or freshwater, it's going to depend on like how it's osmoregulating, like which way it's pushing water, etc. So in this case, if we're looking at a zebrafish, that's a freshwater fish, the assumption is like the fish is like quote unquote saltier than the water outside, right? That's the idea. I'm kind of using that term loosely, do a little air quotes. And so what's going to happen naturally is that fresh water is going to want to force its way into the body of the fish, right? It's going to want to get through that skin. And so likely what's happening is that skin is defending against that water movement, or it's constantly, is it pushing water out? I don't remember what it would be doing, but I think it's pushing water out.
I'm not
thinking about this now. Yeah. I'm like, shoot, I should have done more research on this. Because I know there's
believe
a lot
it's pushing water out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so
freshwater
too.
fish are constantly trying to remove water from their bodies via various excretory processes.
I just don't remember whether or not it's coming through the skin. I know the kidneys are doing a lot of that work. So like when they're essentially like getting rid of excreting like water and waste and stuff like that, or urine, it's basically coming out like very, very it's very dilute, right? Because they're trying to get rid of as much water as possible. So, but yeah, the skin is it's cool. It's working really hard. It's probably working a little harder than ours is, I guess, because being in the water. I mean, if you go in the water for like maybe like 20 minutes, probably you'll get pruny, right? Like your body is not really good at dealing with that. But fish are really special in that way. So they also have a bunch of scales, except for the scaleless fish. I didn't really look into like the different types of fish that don't have a lot of scales, right? Or they have like, I don't know a whole lot about those guys. But scales provide like this crazy level of protection and armor for them. And they have them pretty much all over the place, right? To sort of defend. So they have like so many layers of defense before you actually get to the animal's body, which is kind of good, right? Because, being out in the wild, especially so many of them are prey species. I think that's important.
Yeah. And they're so pretty too.
Yeah, that's true. They're very iridescent, right?
Yeah. And scales, like there's a bunch of different forms of scales too, like depending on the kind of fish. And then they can also be like highly modified for different things in fish too, right? So like pufferfish, those scales are modified to be spiny, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's true. That's awesome. There's so much adaptation. I mean, it's kind of hard to talk generally about it because there are so many different species that are so varied. So fish scales are actually composed of this surface layer that contains something called hydroxyapatite and then calcium carbonate. And I guess there's like a deeper layer that has collagen, but those are important to know, right? Calcium carbonate's very hard. It's like your hard coral, right? It's that sort of thing. So it's definitely great, built for protection and different, like, have you guys ever seen, what are they called? The like Raphael cats? I think they're called Raphael catfish.
Yep.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about? Amber, have you seen this?
I have not.
I'm just going to like quickly pull, or maybe you could pull that up and put in the chat. There are a couple different types of catfish like this that are they look like tanks. Like they're incredible. And they have really strong scales. And I don't even think I think They live a long time, and yeah, like they're just it's pretty crazy. They have
a bunch of like the Plecostomus. All of those fish are kind of like they're striped and spotted Raphael catfish. So I'm assuming you're talking about the spotted ones.
I put the spotted one in the chat so you can see what that looks like. But yeah, they're striped and spotted. I think the striped ones have as much armor.
No.
Mm-mm. Okay, yeah. So the spotted ones have crazy armor.
Yep. And
then Plecostomus. So all the algae eaters, right? Which, by the way, I just want to go off on like a really quick tangent about this because I can't tell you how many times I've heard this before. Like people who like amateur fish keepers, they're all under this impression that plecos, because they eat algae, clean the tank. Like they clean the whole tank, and like you don't have to do anything. If you get a pleco, if you get an algae eater, it just like you don't have to do water changes anymore. They're like, yeah, no, it just eats the shit off the bottom of the tank, and like you don't have to do anything. And I'm like, no, that's why your fish died. Does not work that way.
Yeah. And like a lot of the more common plecos you can get in the pet trade don't do a great job of like cleaning the algae anyway.
Oh,
like,
do they not?
I mean, like just the regular like sailfin pleco that gets massive. They're only mediocre at that job, I think. And then you've got
one job though.
Well, there are different kinds of plecos too. Like clown plecos eat wood. Like they eat bark and like they will eat the wood in your tank or whatever. So I don't know, the bigger sailfin plecos. And like, speaking of scales, to bring this all back around to scales, when I worked in the pet trade, I remember we had a very, very large pleco that got returned to the store because it happens all the time. Right. And those things have kind of nasty spines on the ends of their pectoral fins. Like when they're getting into like breeding condition, they get these like raspy kind of things on the leading edge of their pectoral fins. And I don't know what happened, but this fish ended up dying in the store because it's a pet store. And it was in some random tank with plants or whatever. And it just it was sitting in one spot forever. Right. It died. And then I think eventually somebody noticed that it was dead, but it was just the armor plating of the fish was just still in like the shape that it's in. And the rest of the fish was gone. It was just this, like the skeleton was still there. And then the armor plating was there. And then as soon as you touched it, just kind of like crumbled into, and that armor plating was really good, but the fish was gone. So,
oh man. So it's used for deception.
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure.
So I'm reading here that, so most eels are scaleless, catfish lack scales with the exception of some of these guys. And it actually says they're dermal plates on some of these species. So I think they still kind of.
And there are 4 kinds of scales, right? Like, and the different types of fish have different kinds of scales.
I definitely don't know. Do you know what those are?
I do know what they are. I so do. Okay. So, but I'm going, even though we're talking about bony fish, I can tell you about teleos scales a little bit.
You're allowed.
That's one of the 4 types. So you've got like placoid scales, which are sharks and rays, which are modified teeth.
Yes.
Technically, maybe all scales are modified teeth, but I don't know. That I don't know. And then you've got like the ancient fish, like lungfish and stuff, has cosmoid scales.
Ooh. That's cool. What does that mean?
It just has to do with the shape of their scales. So I don't know. Okay. I'd have to look it up. I don't actually know.
So it looks like a Cosmo?
Sure. It's Cosmo Kramer. That's a reference.
Giddy up.
Yeah.
Oh, or Kramer?
Yeah.
Wow, even deeper.
Yeah. There is, or not, is it cosmoid or is it cycloid? They're one of the two. Anyway, but there's cycloid scales as well. There are ganoid scales, which are like gars and bashirs. They have ganoid scales, which are kind of like they all lock together in like little triangle shapes or whatever.
Right? I love that. They're so beautiful. It actually looks very beautiful, those guides.
Yeah. And then there's the cycloid and the ctenoid scales, which are most bony fishes. So you're going to see just your standard like scales, like zebrafish have, I think, cycloid scales. So do salmonids.
Oh, okay.
And then like some fish, like I think like bass and stuff. I don't remember which all. They have ctenoid, which is ctenoid scales. So those are the scale types. I had to learn that for animal form and function. Thank you, John Houseman. I'm very thankful for that learning because it's been useful, obviously.
Coming in clutch. I did not know. Man, boy, did I not realize I had so much to learn about scales. That's awesome. Okay. Any other thoughts on scales before we move on to slime?
I don't think so.
All right, great. So slime is next, right? So that's sort of slime is the most external layer of your fish, right? And the slime layer is amazing. I was looking up that like they have like certain number of like immune cells up there and stuff. Like they have all sorts of stuff because it's, for us, right? We have our integument, right? We have our skin as our main layer, and like that in and of itself, is a physical barrier. But for them, their slime layer is kind of the top dog. That's the thing that a lot of different opportunistic pathogens are just going to hit and die or not ever make their way through the slime layer. So that's the most important thing that it does is defend against pathogens. It probably helps with osmoregulation too. Actually, I didn't look that up, but that's probably
it definitely does. And like the thickness of the slime layer can change based on like the stress level of the fish and the disease level. And that can affect their ability to osmoregulate as well.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know like we like to point out differences between, say us and vertebrates like fish. And I get that we don't really have something akin to a slime layer in humans, but the slime layer in fish is where like the external microbiome kind of lives, right? It's something that we think about more and more now, where it's like what organisms live in that layer.
Yeah.
We kind of have a slime layer too, which is our own microbiome on the outside of our skin. It's just not as slimy most of the time. So it's a
Maybe
little
after
different.
I get off the elliptical, I'm pretty slimy.
Yeah, there you go. But so that's just the only thing is that like, we have a microbiome that's kind of external to our body. So do these guys. And it's just theirs is a little slipperier than ours.
Oh yeah. And it sticks to you, right? Like if you catch a fish, man, like that stuff will stay with you. And the smell.
Yeah. Oh, and some fish have like wildly modified slime layers too, like
the
hagfish.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Just Google. Okay. If you're listening to this, stop for 1 second. Go to YouTube, look up hagfish, and then just like watch videos of hagfish slime. Like I think there are even ones of predators trying to eat hagfish, and they just excrete this incredible amount of slime so quickly that the predator like can't consume them or something like that. If I remember correctly.
Yeah, they like get so worked up about it, they tie themselves in knots and like throw slime basically.
So
the other
disgusting.
thing to Google, if you're going to look up hagfish, you have to Google hagfish car crash.
I don't know what that means. Wait, you know what that is too, Amber?
Yeah, I think I've seen images of it, right? It's like the car that's just covered in slime.
Yes. And there's pictures of like the aftermath. It's sad because all these hagfish died, but like a truck carrying hagfish got in an accident.
A hagcident?
It's not a pun, it's a play on words.
A hagcident. And dumped slime all over a road in Oregon, and specifically all over a car in Oregon.
I feel like if you were legit driving down like the highway and you hit hagfish slime, you'd probably just crash your car, right? Like I don't think you'd be able to.
Yeah, I think it was like this truck dumped its hagfish all over this one car. And how would you like to claim that with your insurance? Well,
I know that car is totaled.
Yeah. You'd never get the smell out.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
terrible.
100%.
So it's important to note that while the slime layer is so good and so important, when the slime layer is interrupted, this is when you have problems, right? So there are a lot of ways that this could happen. I highlighted injury and poor water quality as the top two ways that this happens. So whether injury is from a predator or more than likely if you have fish at home, especially like cichlids, which are aggressive, but this is the case for a decent amount of fish. If they attack each other, they're biting through that slime layer. They're interrupting that. They could get through the scales and the skin. They could do all three. And so all of a sudden that fish is exposed, right? The injury, you could have like a lesion or something that's exposed to just the water. And normally the fish would be fine, but unfortunately there's a decent amount of just, like you said, your microbiome, there's a decent amount of just like flora is plants, right? So fauna.
It's totally fine to just call it flora. I think that's a colloquial. It's fine.
Perfect. Okay. So there's so much flora in your fish tank itself or in your system itself. that most of them are fine, but there are a few that are opportunistic. So once this is interrupted and you have some injury or whatever, they can cause issues for your fish and invade the fish's body and end up killing it if the right circumstances come about. They do have immune systems, but still, it's sometimes hard to fight this, especially if they're overrun. Sometimes you see things like fungus on fish, which seems so weird that fungus can just grow on an animal like that, but it certainly can in this environment. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think slime coat is something we always need to be mindful of whenever we like handle fish too. So if we're working with zebrafish, they're pretty rugged when it comes to being handled. Like they don't tend to just straight up fungus up or whatever if they get handled a little bit roughly. But we definitely do think about it. When I worked with salmonids, we had to be very, very mindful of that slime coat. And we would actually use products that were like polymers that you can buy that help to like kind of bolster that slime coat temporarily when they're under stress. So it helped a lot in keeping our fish like relatively healthy externally anyway. So.
Wow. Poor water quality is another way, right, that you can kind of have issues. If the water quality is really bad, it can probably do some level of disruption to the slime coat. It can burn. So this is another reason why water quality is important, to make sure that it's good, because it can affect their ability to produce slime, or they can affect their just their slime coat in general and cause, once again, opportunistic pathogens to come in. I think that's kind of that's the theme, right? Like typically fish are usually fine. Like once in a while you have maybe a virus or a bacteria or a protist that comes in and invades and kills your fish. But a lot of times something has to happen for that to be the case, right? So I know in our betta fish facility, we had a lot of poor water quality early on when we were first figuring things out, like how often the water change and stuff. And I didn't realize it at first because they were all static tanks. Like they didn't have any constant water flow. But once I started doing water quality on these different tanks, I was seeing how high the ammonia levels were. And that was like, oh, well, now I know why they're getting ick and why they're getting velvet and a lot of these diseases that you see commonly in the pet trade. And that was 100% the reason why. So something to keep in mind. Always, water quality is very important. That's definitely a good key takeaway.
Yep. Always the first thing you check.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other thoughts on skin slime coat scales before we move on to the next one?
Nope.
All right, cool. So the next anatomical feature we're going to talk about is the lateral line. So the lateral line is really important for fish because they use it to detect movement and vibration and pressure gradients in the water. So this is really important to evade predators. And to sense when there's another fish in the area, or usually just predators. I feel like it's usually predator related, right? And the lateral line it's comprised of these small holes that are under the skin that they basically use to detect those things. And if you look at a lot of fish, you can sometimes see the lateral line, right? Like you can see these like larger pores, right, that kind of go along. I think there are smaller pores underneath as well. There's these large lateral line pores that you can see that run right down, kind of like from behind the gill all the way down the tail. You could see that line. And so, even though they do have good eyesight, they still react. Like, if you ever have been like to the side of a lake and you see there's like all fish, a bunch of pumpkin seeds, your favorite fish, hanging out. And then you throw like something in the water, like as soon as they have that splash, they're reacting to the vibrations from that quicker than they're reacting to the actual movement of the water, whatever that rippling is, right? Like they're reacting to those vibrations very quickly. So they'll duck out as soon as possible. It's a very important sensory thing that they have. I don't really know if any species other than fish have that. It's a very interesting evolutionary.
There's similar mechanoreceptors in like crocodilians for sure. That's the only one off the top of my head. I think maybe some amphibians as well may have something similar, but there's actually like a little hair, like an epithelial hair cell that is inside that pore. And that's what's actually triggering it. The other thing is I think that some fish actually have like the tissue or like the actual like part of the body that's like transmitting to the brain are called neuromass. I think that's what it's called. Okay. I have to double check that, but they'll have parts of the lateral line neuromass system on other parts of their body, like predatory fish on their face like near their mouth, that kind of thing. Like think of like the long face of like a pike or a walleye or something. They'll actually have little pores as well. I don't know about other fish, but I'm pretty sure, yeah, the main lateral line is the one that runs like kind of like from the head to the tail.
Yes.
But then they have like additional parts of that depending on the species, I think.
Very cool.
And I think the sharks have ampullae of Lorenzini, because I'm not going to let the teleost fish go. I'm just going to keep talking about cartilaginous fishes. Sorry.
They have what? They have a different version?
So it's like a modified lateral line. It's like it evolved from the lateral line. Like it has a common like structural ancestor, for lack of a better term. It's the ampullae of Lorenzini. So it's electroreceptive. So I don't know how that's related to, the electroreceptive organs that we see in some of the bony fish.
Yeah, because we do have some that are receptive to electricity, right? Like there are a few that can sense that. And so we actually have a researcher, I think, who studies that in, I think, elephant nose fish, because I think they are. The
electrosensory organs in fish, like I think evolved like 6 or 7 different times separately. So you see them in like the knife fish, you see them in the elephant nose fish, you see them in like some sharks and rays, and then a couple other species of fish. And those fish are ostensibly not related to each other. But yeah, we had somebody that studied a number of the different electric sensing fish, and they always love to tell people. That's why I know that. It's because they're like, it evolved separately. And it's like, cool. 7 times. Okay, great.
They're like the marathon runners at the fish world. They just have to tell you.
Yeah. They have to tell you
all about it.
Yeah. It's still cool, but I was like, I hear it every time we give a tour.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm learning new things left and right, guys. This is crazy.
Sorry.
No, this is good. I feel like I should be taking more notes. Okay, so we're going to move on from lateral line to the swim bladder. So the swim bladder is just a straight up sac of air in the middle of the fish. And most bony fishes do have this. Cartilaginous fish do not have this, right? So your sharks and rays and stuff, they just... Is that where the sink or swim iteration comes from? That adage?
I don't know.
Actually know.
They just have really oily livers. Like the cartilaginous fish have like giant livers for buoyancy.
Gotcha.
Oh, that's how they're able to kind of buoy themselves. Okay. So I'll say this. So the goal of most fish is neutral buoyancy, meaning that like the swim bladder, they want to sort of just sit perfectly in the water column. And the reason why that is because that's going to cost the least energy for the fish to be able to stay perfectly in the water column, so that like when they use their fins to go in a direction, they're just going to smoothly, it's like they're in outer space, right? It's very little energy. So that's going to be the best case scenario for those fish. When they get sick or they have some issue with their swim bladder, that's when they have problems and they're expending a lot more energy on moving around, which is bad for the fish overall, right? They don't want to there's no reason to waste energy, right? So there is an organ called the gas organ, right? And this is like connected to the swim bladder itself. So the swim bladder looks like it literally looks like a trash bag filled with air. Like I don't know. It's like it's crazy to me. Like even when I like dissect fish occasionally, I'm like, it just doesn't seem like it belongs there. It doesn't look like the other organs, right? It kind of
it's kind of like a big silvery thing, right?
Yeah, it's like silver, right? Like a silver bag. I don't know.
Yeah, 100%.
So the mechanism by which they inflate the swim bladder is sort of really interesting. So they fill the bladder by acidifying their blood, which causes it to lose oxygen. So the oxygen goes from the blood and diffuses into the swim bladder, I guess to escape the blood, which is acidified. And that will cause the swim bladder to inflate, and that thus they will rise a little bit more or whatever. So that's the way they're constantly able to keep that. And somehow they're able to control that. I can't imagine that's conscious. I think that's all subconscious.
I literally didn't know that was how that works. So that's cool. Thank you.
Yeah, same.
I had to look it up. There's a graphic here, if you look down a little bit, that just shows like where that is and kind of how the arteries, all the capillaries sort of work with it. It's very interesting. So yeah. The gas gland or gas organ. So yeah, it's crazy. They have that, and it seems to work pretty well because most fish don't have an issue. Oh, I also wanted to mention So the bladder walls have blood vessels lined with guanine crystals, which I was just like, crystals. Oh my God. So exciting. Make sure you charge your crystals. These fish be charging their crystals. Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was so weird. I was like, what? Like I had to reread that. I don't even know what a guanine crystal is, but sounds like it should be decorating in your house or something. I don't know.
So guanine is also used by like animals in like tissues to change like color, like to create certain colors in the tissues. But I don't know in that form. I literally don't know. Sorry.
If anything piques your interest while we're talking about this, feel free to look it up. I'm always interested.
Sure.
But yeah, anyway, so that's kind of how the swim bladder works. You definitely see issues with fish either that, develop without a swim bladder or like not with like a not functional swim bladder, or maybe have issues later on. And we see it in the fish too, right? Like
100%
unhealthy fish, all of a sudden they just have a problem. But I think because this mechanism is so nuanced that it requires so much, this process to fill the bladder and it requires, for them to be able to sort of affect their blood and everything. I think that it's very easily screwed up, right? When the fish are sick or something like that. And then they just are lying at the bottom, right?
The other thing is like, I think different fish at like young ages, like larval stages, their swim bladder isn't inflated right away, right? So we see that with zebrafish, it's like 4 or 5 days. And what I've always been taught was that like they go and they take a big old gasp of air and then they fill their swim bladder, but I don't know how that mechanically would work. Do you know what I mean? I feel like every lecture about larval development includes that. And it's like, do they really? Is that really how that works? I literally don't know though.
I don't know. Yeah, I feel like I see it in
Am I the only person that's heard that before?
No,
I've never heard that.
Oh, really?
I only heard it kind of recently because I always thought this is my idiocy, I guess. I always thought that you needed the water kind of shallow just so that like there was enough oxygen making its way into the water.
Oh, I see.
But what I was taught later on and learned kind of more recently in the past couple of years or whatever, was that zebrafish have like this little like sticky pad on the bottom of their chest, and then they like walk themselves up the side and like go to the top surface of the water and then inflate by, I guess, gulping air. It's like we have to look this up to like
because the other thing is like they can respire through their skin when they're very, very small, right? So that's the other thing. I always assumed that I didn't want to have very deep water for very young fish because you just don't want them expending extra energy to have to get to the surface.
Yeah,
right?
because at that point they're not really swimming around. They're not strong enough.
Yeah, you want them to use that energy to grow. You don't want them to use their energy to have to like ambulate.
Yeah, or fight against like, water flow or anything like that.
Yeah, 100%.
Let's move on just because we got a lot to cover, guys. And sometimes we'll do more cursory overview things, and we may not get super detailed. But we're gonna move on from the swim bladder to the respiratory and circulatory system. So one thing that's very obvious, but might not be obvious to everyone listening, is that all fish have a 2-chambered heart. So unlike mammals that have 4 chambers, you have 2 ventricles and 2
atria.
Thank you. I was going to say aortas. No. You have 2 aortas. If you have 2 aortas,
I mean, you have like up above. I don't know. I'm feeling stupid now.
2 atriums and 2 ventricles.
Yes.
You have left and right for each. Amphibians actually, I forget if they have 3 chambers, but I forget like which one is the double and which one's the single. But for fish, it's very easy. It's like a one-way street, right? So it's very simple, and you only have to deal with a single valve.
I think 3-chambered animals have 2 atria and a ventricle.
Okay, cool. Yep. Sounds good. And then, so that's pumping all their blood. Good stuff. And they have these wonderful things called gills. And I did not write a lot of things in the notes about that. Gills are the primary source for oxygen transfer, obviously, right? So the thin lamella, right? The little projections of the gills, those red things. Everyone knows even the common person knows what a gill is, right? Like they are responsible for all this oxygen transfer, just like our alveoli in lungs is the same idea, right? Like you need those membranes to be very thin so oxygen can cross over.
Yeah.
Gills are also a huge organ for ammonia transfer. So they're actually getting rid of a lot of their waste through their gills, which I didn't know before looking this up.
But really? I got to take your fish card away. That's how they excrete most of their ammonia.
Well,
most fish. Yeah.
I knew this. Well, I didn't know this. I'm sorry. Let me take that back. I knew it before looking this up, but only recently when I was doing some stuff on nitrogen cycle was I like, wait a minute. So they're actually excreting more ammonia from their gills than anywhere else. Yeah. So totally, you could take my fish card away. I thought you already took it away from my terrible fish tank.
You have to do more to get it back now.
All right, cool.
I did just want to add one thing about gills. And this was something that, like, when I learned it in school, blew my mind, like, about how gills work. So gills work under the principle of countercurrent exchange. So have you guys heard that before?
Yes.
No. So basically how it works is you imagine like two kind of like pipes, one on top of the other. And so you imagine that the bottom pipe is your blood. That's the blood that's flowing through the gill, and it is flowing to the left. So that is the direction the blood is going. So it's leaving the heart. It's going to the gills, I believe. And then, and then the other pipe above that is flowing to the right, and that is your water. And so the gills are maximizing the contact time with water for gas exchange, ammonia exchange, etc., from the blood vessels into the water by having those two kind of like vessels flow in opposite directions. So that's how the exchange happens in the gills and is maximized. So imagine the blood flowing in the opposite direction of the water flow in order to increase that amount of time of contact to do gas exchange, ammonia exchange, etc.
That makes sense, right? Because like if they're going the same direction, like, you know, basically the water is going to be like sticking with the blood, right? Like if the blood was traveling the same way as the water was going in fish, right? Like it was kind of like this same blood would be kind of with the same water for the whole time. It'd be pulling some oxygen, but it wouldn't be the highest level of oxygenated water, as opposed to going opposite ways where it's constantly hitting with fresh. That sort of makes sense to me, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, basically the blood leaves the ventricle of the fish. That's the bottom chamber of the heart. And it goes to the gills to oxygenate. So think of that as like, that's the lungs. Basically, it's a similar organ. And then that oxygenated blood is going elsewhere.
Very cool. Love it. All right. So that is the respiratory and circulatory system. We probably didn't cover everything that's in there, but we'll move on for the sake of time to the digestive system. So fish eat. I have a little graphic here, but basically they eat. They have their esophagus, mouth, esophagus, you know, typical things that most animals have. And then food goes to their stomach. That's the next thing, and that's where it's digested. Am I missing something here?
If they have a stomach, not all fish have a stomach.
They have kind of like they have like a sort of just like a digestive. Yeah, sometimes they just generally call it like a digestive tract, right?
Yeah, like a gut sac is the stomach in like some fish.
Like even in zebrafish, I don't think it's a true stomach, right?
They don't have a stomach, no.
Yeah, I feel like when I've dissected them, it's just been like, this is like a tube.
Yep.
That's it. They have but anyway, when it's leaving that area, it's digested down. I'm sorry. Yeah. So it's broken down into some sort of liquid form. And then there's ducts to the liver and the pancreas that are usually between the stomach and the intestine. There's going to be, I don't know. I mean, I think we know the basic function of like the liver and pancreas for fat absorption and fat release. But I don't really need to get into it too much before the rest of it hits the intestine, and that's where all your nutrients are absorbed, right? So it's absorbed into the bloodstream there before it hits the rectum and the anus and gets expelled out of the fish and into your fish tank.
That you have to clean up.
That you have to clean.
The pleco's not going to do that for you.
The pleco cleans it.
No. Yeah, he's just vacuuming the poop as soon as it comes out of the fish.
Everyone thinks it's a fish vacuum. I don't know why. It's crazy.
Hey, my favorite part of the digestive system in fish is at the other end, though. It's like, you guys have probably heard of esophageal jaws in fish. Like that second set of jaws. And some fish, they can like extend it like the friggin' alien from Alien.
Yeah, those are
Like,
nuts.
yeah, but even like angelfish and like common pet trade fish have a second set of teeth that's lower down in their esophagus.
Okay.
Oh,
Why is
cool.
that for?
It's their actual chewing like organ, basically.
Okay.
Okay.
So like I used to have angelfish when I was a kid, and like I was an only child and I was bored, and I would feed sometimes like larval swordtails or whatever I was breeding.
Oh my God.
The ones that were deformed, I would feed them to the angelfish. And so they take in food by suction, right? A lot of fish just suck food in.
Yeah.
So they suck in, and they don't actually have any teeth like in the front of their mouth per se. But then if you sat there really quietly, you could hear them chewing on the fish with their esophageal jaw, just like crunch, 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 crunch. You could hear. Yeah. That was what I did when I was 11.
Wow. I need a stethoscope.
Yeah. But it was like loud enough that you could hear it. And I think some fish maybe modify those jaws for like communication or something. I'm not sure. But I think a lot of fish do have that little chewy organ that's a little further down in their throat.
Oh, wow. That is awesome. See those adaptations. That's why they're able to swallow. I feel like I've seen enough videos and sometimes in person of fish like swallowing much gigantic, like fish that are so way too big for them, right?
Yep.
Catfish are like known to do this. Like in the pet trade, I cannot tell you how many times people would buy one of those little channel cats and then be like, oh, I put it in my community tank and it ate everything in there. And it's like, they have this, like the belly is like distended beyond belief, but they do fine. Like they just eat everything and then they just have everything in there and they just, I guess they digest it out.
Yeah,
Must be
they're good
painful
for a while.
shit. Yeah.
But it's definitely interesting to me how some fish or fish species have like a really refined digestive system. And so, Christine, I feel like you can speak more on this, but like
I don't know.
sharks. Well, sharks, like they literally just utilize everything. Like they don't really poop. Is my understanding, or it's like very yes. And so they just like literally anything that they eat, they like use all of it.
Yeah. They have something like, so like with fish, most fish, they don't have like a super complex like intestine, right? So it's basically a tube. Well, I joke about this all the time with people. I'm like, the fish digestive tract is a tube. You put something in one end, it's going to push things out the other end. That's basically how.
Yeah, right. That's why they're always like pooping when they're eating.
Yeah. But you think of like, you know, us or like herbivores or whatever, we have like tons and tons of like loops of intestines. So sharks and rays do something kind of in between. They have something called a spiral valve. So is this what you're talking about, Amber?
I think so. I don't know the technical terms.
It's basically like a spiral inside that tube of the GI tract that allows them to maximize their digestion of things. So it's like just increasing the surface area. So I can send a picture over if you guys want to see. But yeah, it's kind of a cool like modification for a relatively simple, like I'm not calling bony or non-bony fish simple, but you know,
we tell your bias, your pro shark bias.
Yeah, I kind of really like sharks.
Oh wow, spiral valve and earth shark. It just doesn't. Okay, I got you. It looks like a cucumber with ribs inside.
It kind of does.
Cucumber with ribs.
It's got like a bunch of potato chips inside.
Yeah, it's got potato chips.
It does. Or it looks like a hot dog with potato chips inside.
Hot dog with potato chips inside. That's incredible.
Yeah, for those of you listening.
Definitely look that up. So it's called a spiral valve.
Just called the spiral valve. Yep.
Yeah. But in that case, I'm always like, I would love to be a shark because my digestive system, you know, like sometimes you have a hard time in the bathroom.
Sure.
Yeah.
These sharks, they never have to go. It's amazing.
Yeah.
The ultimate.
They just live in their bathroom anyway. They can just go whenever they want, just like fish.
That's pretty good. That's like me in the ocean.
I'll stay away from you if we ever go in the ocean together.
You'll see. I'll have a really like sly smile on my face. You want to get away.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, the excretory system. Let's go, guys.
Yep.
Transitions are my forte. So I put gills here again because they are part of the excretory system, as Christine said as well. They are so responsible for getting rid of ammonia in the fish. but I also mentioned kidneys. And so just as a reminder, so freshwater fish are saltier, right, than the water around them. And saltwater fish are sort of like more fresh, like they're more there's like less salt inside their bodies than outside in the saltwater. So they're sort of working in different directions, right? So the freshwater kidney of a freshwater fish is working to get rid of as much water as possible and a few solutes here and there, a few of the things in there. And then saltwater fish are getting rid of as little freshwater as possible. So they're excreting very, very concentrated excretions, right? Or is it urine in fish? I'm like not remembering now.
I mean,
I think it's like, sorry,
fish has urea, I think.
I think so. Yeah, we have to look that up because I think it's like it's interesting depending on what animals we're talking about, right? Like reptiles excrete like I think uric acid.
Yeah. I think it depends. Like different fish are like specialized for different things, but I know that like for the most part it's just straight up ammonia that's coming out. But then
that's what I
fish
thought.
can excrete urea as well. I know because like we used to work with toadfish, and one of the things that folks were looking at with them was they can create pretty large amounts of urea, and they actually use it as like communication potentially. So they'll like pee at each other to communicate. So
yeah.
Lovely.
Maybe there's a few humans that do that.
Yeah, I hope. Yeah, it's like dogs. I guess they smell each other's pee or whatever. So
yeah, and then they have to pee there.
Yeah, they pee on top. Yep.
Isn't it mostly the male dogs that do that though? Like our dog doesn't do that. She's a female. I don't think she's ever done that.
No, I think it's mostly males because it's like marking territories and yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
But did not know that fish did that either.
So yeah, some fish, I think they think at least, because I remember when we were working with them, that was the thought, was that like they're shooting pee at each other to try to communicate.
What
a time. What a dating life for these fish.
Exactly. That's all I have on excretory, so we can move on to the nervous system.
Sure.
So I didn't even write a lot of stuff here, but we'll just say they have, oh my God, I was going to look up number of neurons in zebrafish and I totally forgot to Google that. I just wrote number of neurons here. So feel free to look that up, Christine.
Okay.
One of the primary large portions of the brain in especially in prey species of fish, and this is probably true of all fish, is their optic lobes. They're big because it's so important for them to see whether or not fish are hunting, or whether or not they're being hunted. They need to be able to see very well. So they have a lot of brain power dedicated to that.
So according to Max Planck Institute, it's about 100,000 neurons for zebrafish.
100,000. Okay.
Wow.
Pretty good. We have like billions, right? Like I think we have like billions of neurons in humans.
I'll look that up too. I literally don't have any idea about any of this stuff. So 86 billion for people.
Oh, see, I was right. I just said billion. So
like mice have 8 to 14 million neurons.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what we're learning is that zebrafish are not like, they don't have that many neurons. They're not like the smartest.
I mean, this is more manageable. 100,000 is more manageable.
Trying their best. Leave them alone.
Oh man.
All they want to do is lay eggs and eat. That's all they need. That's all they need.
Yeah, that's it. It's too many things, or not too many things for that matter.
Yeah.
So they have all their nerves going to all their different senses. So number one, I have the nares, which are like basically the nostril organ, more or less. So they use that to smell food or to evade predators, right? This is a common theme. The two, to eat or to be eaten, right? Like to avoid. So those are the two things that the nares are useful for. They do have taste glands, just like us. So I think that, like, I mean, I'm sure you've seen like a fish bite into something and then be like, oh, this isn't food, and like spit it back out. Like I've seen it enough.
But I think taste glands in fish are like all over their face.
It could be.
I think so. Like, because you know how like zebrafish, for example, have barbels, those little beardy things.
Yeah.
Those are taste organs for sure.
Okay, yeah. So that's all the carps have that, right? They all have those little dangly barbels.
Or like catfish, right? Catfish have like
100%. Okay. Yep. So I think those probably not entirely just for taste, but like fish don't necessarily have just taste buds on their tongue. It's kind of all over their face.
Okay, cool.
I definitely didn't know that. So that's really awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, barbels are absolutely like, in part, at least a taste organ. I'm sure they're
that
also
makes sense. I knew, that they kind of had a function similar to like almost like a whisker or something. I don't know, but I guess, it's like tasting.
I'm really glad I don't have to taste everything with my face everywhere I go. That would be bad.
Yeah, that would be strange.
It would be not good.
Like without even helping it, like you can't help.
Yeah, just
especially
everything.
walking around New York City. I don't want to taste most of the stuff that's floating around the city.
Oh, yikes. I can't imagine with Chicago, like when you get on the CTA, it's just like anything that's on that train.
Oof. Yeah, 100%. Oof.
Females. Okay, so females, usually 2 very large ovaries. I say that because it's just like, that is just like the basic drive of all these fish, right? To just like have as many eggs as possible, as many babies as possible. The males have a pair of testes as well. That's pretty common. There are some really crazy reproductive things that we won't get into, but I think we should. I think I wrote this down as a podcast thing for the future, like anglerfish, for instance, like the crazy goes about there. So I want to do that in the future.
We should definitely talk about the diversity of like fish reproduction.
Yeah.
And like just fish being, so that everyone can calm down about like genders.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just like, there's just a whole lot of stuff, right? There's like a whole lot of stuff. So definitely we'll talk about that in another pod, because I just think it's like really cool. But for now, just for the sake of, let's say, zebrafish, we're talking about pretty typical reproduction, right? So, I even wrote this. I said reproduction alone could be a whole podcast.
There you go.
But most fish externally fertilize their eggs. There are some that don't, but we'll just talk about external fertilize for now. And so they basically are egg scatterers. So for zebrafish specifically, and a decent amount of fish that just scatter their eggs, the males and females, they get together. There's usually some sort of courtship, could be pretty. So some quick courtship followed by usually scattering, like them getting together, scattering eggs and sperm very close to each other where they're fertilized. It still amazes me that that's able to work, but I guess just because there's so many sperm, they're able to fertilize most of those eggs. And then they go to develop into zebrafish or whatever fish that externally fertilize. So
nice.
Yeah, that's my quick summation.
Yeah. And I mean, it makes it like really useful, especially in research, because they have so many eggs versus like, if you're working with mice, like you're only going to have a litter of a certain size, right? And so maybe up to like 10 pups. And so very useful to have like, fish just basically fertilizing, like you could have hundreds of eggs. And again, I don't know if other species there might be other species where you don't get as many. Yeah.
And then you've got like salmonids who make like thousands and thousands of eggs.
Oh, that's right.
And then I think there are some fish that make like, I think a lot of saltwater fish, they make like tens of thousands, but they're really, really small. So most of them don't survive. So yeah, that's really cool.
True of a lot of like the crustaceans too and stuff like that. Like a lot of the inverts, it's like crazy the number.
That's not a fish.
I mean, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
I'm kidding. I love inverts. It's fine. Inverts are great.
I do too. Shout out to our invert specialists out there.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. The last thing that I want to touch on is the immune system. At least I looked at, I think fish in general, but certainly zebrafish, have an innate and adaptive immune system. So innate immune system is your general response immune system. So those are things like macrophages, neutrophils, a lot of your cells that might be engulf things. I don't want to really get too deep into it because it gets a little bit boring. And then the adaptive immune system is like your specific response, right? So that's like when you get sick and then you have to like recover, right? Like you get sick and then like you develop antibodies for whatever the disease might be, right? And they're able to fight that off, right? And the B and T cells are also included in that as well. So they do have both, which is great. It means that you can study immune system in these guys.
Yeah, I just wish they had a little bit more, but it's okay. It's okay. It is what it is.
And so the immune cells come from the thymus, kidney, liver, and spleen, I think. And I think there was one more organ that I had on here, but I think I just got rid of it. So like whatever. It doesn't come from their bone marrow so much. Like in humans, like all of our hematopoiesis, like a lot of our like blood cells and all those immune cells are coming from bone marrow. And like I think like probably I think our thymus is also involved in that as well. But in these fish, it's mostly like their kidney actually and liver serves as like these like dual functions, which is kind of neat. I remember learning about like generation of blood cells back in the day, and that was essentially where they were coming from, which I thought was neat. So
yeah, they have like a kidney marrow, basically, right? Fish,
something like that. Yeah, I don't know exactly I don't want to speak out of turn about exactly what it is. But it is, yeah, it's definitely serves like it's a more interesting function than in humans where we kind of have separate organs that are working on that stuff. So, yeah. So, Amber, you said you wish they had a better immune system to fight off the diseases. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, because of course they're in the water. And so they're exposed to anything that's in that water. And this is like a frequent problem. I'm sure like everybody who has worked with fish has dealt with to where they just, there's viruses, there's bacterial infections, like there's a whole array of things that they have to like fight off. And sometimes like, it takes really us, like the water quality and everything like that, to make sure that things are adequate for them. So that way they don't die.
Yeah, and sometimes we all run facilities that have pretty high end UV sterilization or sanitization, and I think that has an impact on their ability to they become naive to some things, and then even the microbiome that is part of the immune system really has an impact on their ability to fight off stuff. I mean, we had to turn off our UVs for several hours over the last couple of weeks so they didn't explode in the power cuts that we were doing. It had a marked impact on survival of some of the older fish.
Yep.
They're already immune compromised to some extent, or not immune compromised, but not as immunocompetent as younger fish might be. And so they're the ones that are starting to show signs of, whatever coming through. So it's tough.
I was going to say that's usually like how you can tell when the fish are old. Like you can see them exhibiting like often like clear signs, clinical issues, right? So that's it.
100%.
All right, guys, what was the most interesting thing you learned today?
Do you want to go first, Amber?
I mean, I can't really choose just one. I felt like I was probably the worst out of this crew because my anatomy and physiology of fish is just like it's the bottom of the barrel.
It's all good.
Everyone
I will
has their
say
expertise.
I am still very curious about eyesight. I would love to learn more about that. Yeah, because I just feel like, obviously there are other things they rely on as well that we talked about. But I just think like the eyes of a fish are just so cool.
I think for me, I think probably the most interesting thing, even going through all this stuff. Actually, you know what? I think the spiral valve was interesting to me, even though that's for your sharks. I thought that was really cool. Now I want to go off and learn about that. But no, I think probably, I think just like learning about the swim bladder was interesting to me because I did not know how that worked before. So, and I would love to even know more about it.
100% swim bladder. Another vote for swim bladder here. I didn't know really the mechanics of how it is regulated. So thank you for sharing that, because I do not like eyes. So I'm not going to put in a vote for eye stuff.
I forgot you just don't like eyes.
Vet techs. Yeah. As a vet tech, the one thing I cannot deal with is eye stuff.
Yeah.
You would love cavefish.
Yeah, they don't have any eyes. Yeah. No, thank you.
I have one of those in my sparse tank here. He's hanging out. He's
probably the happiest one. He can't see it.
You have the right to remain.
Sorry.
Man, no, that was good. That was really good. Oh man, that was a sick burn. That was a sick burn. All right, guys. Well, we learned a lot about fish anatomy, which is pretty cool, and some little bits of physiology, I guess, but it's mostly anatomy. So I think it's about time to sign off. Make sure you guys check us out on Twitter and Instagram at gettingfishypod. What's our email?
So our email is gettingfishypod@gmail.com. We also have a Substack, which you can sign up so you can get like free emails to let you know when we have new content available. And that is gettingfishypod.substack.com.
I think that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah, you can find all our other socials by going to the Substack, for example.
Beautiful. All right, guys. Thanks for another fun adventure with us today. Thank you for listening, and keep schooling, my friends, because knowledge is power.